Have you had a situation where in public, a couple was airing some hurtful grudge against the other partner, supposedly as a joke? Everyone laughed, kind of, and the target of the mockery was left slightly humiliated. This is one sign that something toxic is going on in the relationship and both parties need help. Unfortunately, people in toxic relationships are generally clumsy in letting other people know that something bad is going on in their lives. These include anecdotes, worrying situations served up as a joke, a story about weird use of violence between them, or a description of a battle over household finances. Unfortunately, ignoring such signals for a long time can end badly. If you have someone in your surroundings who does not notice or does not want to notice red flags, send them this video. Toxic relationships need to either be healed or ended. Whichever you decide on, action must not be delayed. First toxic signal is shame. It prevents you from saying everything. Being in a toxic relationship, often, the victim is aware of the abnormalities they are dealing with. He or she does not accept certain behaviors of the other person, does not want to be treated in this way, and often feels very uncomfortable. Victims often know that these are abusive and pathological behaviors. However, something prevents them from bringing them to light. This is the power of shame. An extremely powerful emotion. For many reasons, such a victim does not want to admit even to themselves, let alone to the world, the relationship they are stuck in by their own will. It can be embarrassing. Such a specific way of inhibiting thoughts about the other partner. When you ask how the wife or husband is doing, you will hear in response something vague. Well, you know how it is. And then some reference to one of the popular gender stereotypes. It's a subtle sign, and yet those are the first signs that something bad is happening. A person in a toxic relationship has often a wide range of tolerance to abuse. They accept a lot of abnormal behavior and turn a blind eye to it. Only a small percentage of abnormalities come to light. If you want to help someone in a toxic relationship, pick up on the subtle signs and try to raise awareness of the extent of the problem. It certainly won't be easy, but hearing from outsiders that they are stuck in a toxic pattern will certainly give them food for thought. In particular, people raised by dysfunctional parents in an abusive background will not know what a healthy relationship should look like from the inside. Somebody has to tell them. Second signal that you have a toxic partner. All their former partners are crazy. For some people with a lot of issues in their lives, some of the normal behavior can seem abnormal. Why does this happen? Imagine a simple scenario. If, in previous relationships and previously in the family home, a person managed to resolve everything by shouting or by emotional blackmail, then setting boundaries by a new partner could seem to be abnormal. Because for such a person, the norms are off the scale. People used to fix things with violence will have a hard time understanding boundaries. So if your partner has a lot of stories about their ex being weird, lunatic, madman, consider who the problematic person really was. You have to be extremely unlucky to be attracted to dysfunctional and abusive people all your life. Maybe the problem is the partner and their toxic habits. If a partner talks about his previous partners in the context of lunatics, seriously consider who should be given this title. Remember, not everyone holds the same sentiment as normal in a relationship is. It would be helpful to do a review of what are normal types of behaviors and where to draw a line in relationships. If your partner with a lot of toxic exes has a problem in drawing those lines and setting boundaries, it is a red flag. Third signal of a toxic partner. Don't ignore the red flags. There are several behaviors that are very characteristic for a toxic partner. If we did a statistical study, certain behaviors would be repeatable in most of them. First and foremost is having a tearful story of their upbringing, which is the best and only explanation for most socially dysfunctional and abusive behavior in the present. I'm sorry I hurt you again because my mom, my genes, my disorder, my trauma. You cannot use real or made-up problems from the past as a justification for the harm. It's not that you should stay away from all people with any problematic past. Just be aware that making the past an excuse of present violent behavior is unacceptable. Everyone is sure to have some unpleasant memories from their past. This is often not their fault that they had tough upbringing. However, as we grow up, we become fully responsible for our own actions. You cannot excuse slapping your children by the fact that you were also slapped as a child. Using a sad childhood story or previous relationships as an explanation for socially dysfunctional behavior is one red flag that needs to be noticed. Past problems should be worked on, not used as an alibi. It is worth remembering that the trauma you carry may not have been your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal from it. What else is heavily typical and common with toxic partners? Making derogatory and stereotypical statements about the opposite sex and being just mean to people. What does this look like in practice? Partner does not spare comments about the weight, appearance, or behavior of others, or making generalizations about all men or all women are like that. Obviously, most of the time the toxic partner uses jokes as a way to ease the tension, and that's why this red flag is not easy to spot. Imagine that on a first date you hear that all men think about is just sex and nothing more, but said as a light joke. Well, of course, obviously you are an exception and this was a joke. However, it becomes apparent very quickly afterwards that the toxic partner also starts to think the same way about you at first signs of problems in relationships. Misogyny or misandry are not easy things to get rid of any person. Not only is it difficult to break away from those stereotypes, but they will come back in crisis situations in your relationship and hit you twice as hard. You will hear because all guys do it or all women do it. You are wounded twice because you're being compared with a stupid sexist stereotype. Fourth signal of toxic partner: don't be intimidated. Intimidation is one of the methods used by a toxic partner. It is very common for him to use arguments aimed at making you dependent. What does an abusive partner use most often to convince the other half to be right? Threats, ending the relationship, throwing them out of the flat, and in extreme cases, even taking their own life. This also shows a very disturbing need of controlling the other partner at any cost. Going out alone with family or friends usually ends with an attempt to dictate the time of return and induce reproaches. Controlling messages or calls and using this information as arguments against you in an argument is also likely to emerge with toxic partner. Remember that even an amazing care and boundless love has its limits. It must not lead to imprisonment and the taking away feeling of independence. Constant surveillance and suspicion is also a sign of toxicity and covert aggression and mistrust. Fifth signal of toxic relationship: don't wait for another honeymoon. A relationship with a toxic partner is predictable, unpredictable. It is like a constant sine wave of good and bad moments. You actually never know what to expect from the other person on any given day. Often the victim focuses on his or her life and walks on eggshells around the other person, adapting and avoiding any potential conflict, just not to make the toxic partner angry. It's hopeless because the toxic person will always find a new reason to argue anyway. Of course, as with a sine wave, there are downs, but also ups. Every toxic partner always becomes wonderful, at least for a while, in order to keep the other person with him or her. If things were bad all the time, the relationship would fall apart much sooner. Thanks to these regularly occurring good moments, it is easy to keep the other person trapped in a toxic relationship. Being in a toxic relationship, the victim is probably waiting for the next honeymoon. Tries in every possible way to adjust to the toxic partner and somehow survive. However, it always turns out that good times with an abusive partner last much shorter than the time the toxic partner is delivering pain. Sixth sign of a toxic partner: lack of perspectives for change. It is a painful truth that often when engaging in a toxic relationship, the victim invests a great deal. He or she sacrifices his or her time, energy, often career or friends. The victim is willing to do anything to make the other person change or heal. However, the prospects for any metamorphosis are completely lacking. This is because changing anyone must come from the initiative of the person that needs to change. It is impossible to force anyone to improve if they do not want to do so themselves and don't see any reason to. Being stuck in this vicious cycle and repeating familiar schemes is much easier for a toxic partner, even if it hurts both sides. Any hope that, under someone else's influence, a toxic person will undergo a complete metamorphosis is, unfortunately, far from reality. Many people stuck in toxic relationships think they can become the other person's private therapist and save them. Often these problems are rooted in childhood, previous relationships, or simply untreated mental illness. As we get to know the other person better and better, we find out all this. And instead of referring the partner to a professional psychotherapist, many people try to become one, and this never succeeds, for two simple reasons. Firstly, they are probably not a qualified therapist, and even if they spend an entire weekend studying their partner's psychological profile, this knowledge is not enough to help them. Professional therapists have many tools to help people in need. Secondly, any qualified therapist knows that you should not treat people with whom you have any kind of relationship. It's because you are too close and you need to have the right distance to work on psychological challenges though. You cannot be both cold therapist dealing with hard truths from messy upbringing and a romantic partner on the other day. Seventh signal of toxic relationship is avoiding outside help. Being in a toxic relationship, it is very difficult to assess the situation objectively. Victims also often simply do not have a comparison because their partner's behavior has always deviated from the norm. It is a bit like being a member of a dysfunctional family. Sometimes it is difficult to determine the actual existence of a problem because we don't know how people in properly functioning families behave. Just as often, people who have a toxic partner are aware of the abnormalities, they spot red flags, they feel that something is wrong. However, they also have a picture in their mind of the good moments of the so-called honeymoon period. They then push out the bad, find excuses, or try to keep things secret. Often, victims are simply madly in love, and as a result of chemical changes in the brain, their rational assessment of the situation is distorted. It also happens that a toxic partner makes the other person psychologically or materially dependent, which makes it all the more difficult to walk away. A financially dependent person, even wanting to leave, will have additional resistance in the form of a lack of material independence, which will often cause them to postpone the decision of leaving. Of course, it is much easier for outsiders to assess the situation. It is much easier for an independent person who is not emotionally connected to a toxic partner to spot toxic behavior and red flags. If you notice such behavior in your environment, react. Talk to the victimized person. Draw attention to the pathological behavior and, most importantly, offer help. Victims are often materially but also psychologically dependent. They are often unable to leave on their own. Offering a room to live in while they leave or alone are often very valuable. If you are an affected person, do not be ashamed to accept help. You are not moving in with someone for life, just for a temporary period of time before you get back on your feet. Likewise with financial help, give back or become financially independent. Often you have to overcome shame or moral resistance and agree to the help offered. Remember that this is often the first step to breaking free from a toxic relationship. Thanks for your time. If you liked our video, leave a like and share it with others.